at the hands of the terrorist organization Hamas. Jonathan, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to visit with Jonathan for a couple. We're going to visit with Jonathan, and he's going to share with us what is something I don't think any of us has ever had to relate to. So let's jump in because we don't have a lot of time. You moved to Israel when you were 18, I believe.
Yes.
Tell us what made you move to Israel, and then a little bit about your family.
Well, I grew up in Connecticut, not terribly far from here, in a small town. And a small town that had a small Jewish community, but very together community, made up in great part of Holocaust survivors, and my parents both were Holocaust survivors. And very Zionistic community, and in fact, a fairly good number of sons of Bloomfield, Connecticut, wound up moving to Israel in their youth and staying and helping to build the country. I also fell in love very quickly with this idea of a kibbutz, a cooperative farm that is really a very tight community, but also, in using the terms that our founding father, David Ben-Gurion, used, made the desert bloom. And so by 1981, 82, I was already in Israel, very quickly got drafted into the army and served for many years. I served in reserve duty until fairly recently, actually. And by 1985, having lived on a kibbutz for several years, met my woman who was going to be my wife, and started having kids. And so I've raised 4 now adult children on a kibbutz. And fortunately for me, 2 of those grown kids, after they got married, decided to come back and live on our kibbutz, Kibbutz Nir Oz, which is on the border of Gaza, about a mile. My home was approximately a mile from the border fence of Gaza, right in front of Khan Yunis, which, as we know from the news, is a real anchor of the Hamas terrorist organization. Along the way, my day job for many, many years was working on the farm as the director or the head of our agricultural machinery department. A kibbutz, if nothing else, is a hyper-productive agricultural farm that, as I said, made the desert bloom. We kind of invented irrigation in many respects. And so until October 7th was really an idyllic existence. I was tight with this extended family, about 400, a little over 400 people lived on the kibbutz, from infants all the way up to senior citizens, supporting one another. In a way, realizing the Zionist dream of both defending borders, which we most certainly did, and also serving as part of the breadbasket of Israel. And along the way, I had other horizons, but still, while being a member of the kibbutz, went off to professional academics. And today, I'm a professor of history at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
I see. And I remember when we spoke, you described the kibbutz as a paradise, a registered botanical garden, if you will. October 7th changed that. Walk everybody here through what happened on that day. You actually happened to be in the States for a wedding in Baltimore, which is not that far from where we are sitting. Tell us about that day.
Well, October 7th, in fact, yes, I was on my way with my wife to a wedding in Baltimore, heading towards an academic conference the next day. And we were woken up very early by a friend of ours in Rhode Island who had seen the news that in our region of Israel, along the border with Gaza, there was chaos was breaking out, and she asked us what was going on. I, of course, had no idea, and immediately looked at our internal kibbutz communication system, which is on our cell phones, kind of hyper-modern, saw that, in fact, people were crying out for help. And that would have been around 12:30 in the afternoon, Israel time. I'm also a member of the kibbutz security team, first responder team, and so I was also seeing the communication between our civilian first responders, and had quickly seen that as of 9:30 in the morning, they weren't responding anymore. I called home to my son Sagi's home, I was unable to get into contact with either him or his wife. His wife at that moment, 7 months pregnant with 2 little girls. I was able to get in contact with his son-in-law, one of my daughter's husband, who at that very moment was exchanging fire with Hamas terrorists in and around their home, sheltering in our attached bomb shelters with their 2 young boys and 3 guests who happened to be there, and my ex-wife, the mother of my kids, who is one of the 2 women from the kibbutz who were able to escape captivity on that day, and somehow heroically was able to crawl her way back through our fields to get to the family. And she was bleeding out at the time, but they were able to save her, and eventually, and today she's fine, thank goodness. Yeah.
And her story is quite incredible, because as I understand, she was being taken off to Gaza. An IDF helicopter, am I right, was...
A group of about 10 people were being taken away by Hamas terrorists, women and children, on a stolen kibbutz tractor with a wagon. And they had been followed while driving. Again, this is a mile, no more than a mile. They had been driving through one of the roads going towards Gaza, and an Israeli Apache helicopter fired on them, killed the terrorists, but everyone else was thrown off the wagon. A dear friend of ours was killed, friendly fire, at that moment. My ex-wife played dead, actually, and the rest of the hostages were taken. All of them have been released since, with the women and children that were released in late November, early December. But she, heroically, somehow or another, while playing dead, intermittently was able to crawl her way back to the kibbutz.
So walk us through. Sagi was out there that morning, and what did he see? And tell us since then what's happened.
Yes, Sagi is one of my 2 sons. And Sagi woke up early that morning, as he usually did on Saturdays and holidays, to go work on one of his pet projects, which is to refurbish old buses into usable objects. And he grew up alongside of me at the machine shop. He's very good with his hands. And he went off to our metal shop to refurbish 4 buses to become mobile classrooms, STEM classrooms. And he immediately saw at 6:30 in the morning a group of terrorists, well-armed, well-trained, moving through the kibbutz. He and some other people who were up early put out the alarm to everyone to shelter in place and for the security team to come out. Over the course of the next 2 hours, what they realized it was not just one group of terrorists. It was around 200 heavily armed, what they call themselves Nukhba commandos, Hamas commandos, accompanied by several hundred civilian looters, some of them armed, most of them not, everything from grannies to little children. For 2 hours or so, our brave young and not so young men did what they could to defend the kibbutz. They were overwhelmed by about 8:30. All the time waiting for our army, the IDF, to arrive, which never did. It's a question that will have to be answered later on, why they weren't there. At around 8:30, Sagi went back to his home to ensure that his wife, Avital, and the 2 girls were safely inside of the bomb shelter, locked in. He then exited again and continued engaging with terrorists in and around his home. His whole home was shot up, full of grenade shrapnel. Miraculously, his wife and daughters survived. He was taken at around 9:30 in the morning on October 7th and has not been heard from since. We have some testimony of people who, of the 100 hostages that were released in late November, about 40 of them were from my kibbutz, women and children. Some of them saw him and other people from the kibbutz in the tunnels under Khan Yunis. So we know that as of late November, he was alive, but we also know that 40 of our community were murdered on October 7th, and a total of 80 taken captive. So that is the state of affairs as of now. On that same day, our homes were destroyed. Those several hundred looters that I told you about, they stole everything from my grandkid's tricycle up to our largest farming tractors. Whatever they couldn't take with them, they burned. And so this paradise in the desert that I lived on for the better part of 40 years and grew kids, I invested my life there. It no longer exists, really. And at some point may be rebuilt. It's questionable whether anyone will actually want to return there.
It's a horrific, horrific experience. And Avital has since given birth to a very healthy baby girl. I actually saw a video of her in the hospital giving birth. It was most difficult. It was at the same time the joy of life, and yet her own husband is not there to share this with her. We know that this is so, so difficult for you, and I have no doubt, Mark and I pray every day for the release of the hostages, and everybody in this room shares in that prayer with you. In a moment, thank you. In a moment, I'm going to ask CPAC to put up on the screen a website that everyone should take note of and go to, because each and every one of us in this room does have a role to play. We can be ambassadors for these 136, Sagi, plus the others, and you can see photos up there now of some, there's Sagi right there. Go to the website. It gives you tools on how to reach out to your members of Congress. We have to keep the thought and prayers of these people. Mark and I and others are wearing these dog tags, if you will, that say bring them home. We encourage you also to go to the website and buy these. All the proceeds go to the families. They need our support. And what it does is it raises awareness, because people will ask you, what is it you're wearing? And it gives you the opportunity to speak where these young men and women, and not so young men and women, cannot have a voice. Tell us in the last couple minutes that you're with us here, how, in your head, these people can be ambassadors.
Well, of course, it's a great suggestion to have people go to that website, and there are many options. I feel blessed by being here and feeling the partnership from your community to ours. But even within partnerships, sometimes friends have to say unpleasant things to other friends. And it's become, sadly, difficult for most of the hostage families as of late, that seems as if our own government, the Israeli government, isn't prioritizing the lives of the hostages as it should within its general war effort. I've lived on the border with Gaza since 1982. I lived through rocket attacks, mortar attacks, sniper fire, anti-tank fire, you name it. No one needs to explain to me or any of the other people from our communities how much Hamas needs to be destroyed. That's agreed. But if I could ask for your partnership in this, to reach out to your Israeli partners, to emphasize to them that there cannot be a victory for any of us over Hamas without getting these 136, we hope, Israeli hostages home alive. And that means that as much action needs to be had to get them home alive as needs to happen for the destruction of Hamas. Both things have to happen.
Thank you. We really appreciate you being here. I don't know, perhaps technical difficulties. The website is Bring Them Home. Please go to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Our prayers are with you.